Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Campbell Talk. And tonight we have our guest will be Dennis O'Brien, and he is the executive director, CEO of OBDI. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, but we're going to be talking about male sexual assault or survivors of male sexual assault. So we're hoping to deliver some real good resources here and have like a real live conversation. And of course, you don't see my normal background with my inspirational quotes tonight because I'm in a different location. I'm actually streaming live to you for the very first time from my mom's house in Central Florida. So it's bittersweet memories, and I'm looking forward to hanging out with my brothers and my sister who are all here, and it's going to be really great. So it's kind of like it's been a while since we've all been together, and this is kind of like the first time we were all going to be together at my mom's house. So I am streaming from the room that I usually stay in when I come visit, and some of her stuff is still here on the bed, so you know how that goes. But without further ado, we're gonna go to our what do you call our intro, and then we'll be right back on the scene with Dennis O'Brien. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hey, Mr. O'Brien.
How you doing, sir?
Welcome to the show. So, welcome to Campbell Talk. I'm really glad that you can be here. As many of you know, I started a nonprofit earlier this year called Campbell Health Solutions. We're building the website and everything out, so we're going to be doing a launch in January 3rd. And then, as part of our soft opening, if you will, we've started to do the Campbell Talk show. So if you have never watched this before, you've missed any of the other sessions, you can go back on our Facebook page at Campbell Health Solutions, and you can see the other two shows that we've done. Also, you can see it live on YouTube as well, so you can check us out there as well. So tonight we have Dennis O'Brien. So we're gonna just let him introduce himself.
Hi, my name is O'Brien Dennis, and I'm the president, CEO, and founder of the O'Brien Dennis Initiative. I have been doing this for 11 years. I'm Jamaican by birth and survivor of sexual abuse. I've written 2 books on the subject topic, and I've also written a training manual along with Dr. Kim Arrington on how to understand childhood sexual trauma. And I train clinicians and social workers in how to understand the signs of childhood sexual abuse. I've been involved in foster care for roughly about 17, 18 years. And I'm now currently working in the New York City homeless shelter system as an administrator. And I think this has been my calling in advocating for victims' rights. Apart from being a survivor, I've been homeless when I migrated to the United States 21 years ago. So I think my own personal journey and story has aligned with the work that I have been embarking on since I've been in this country. So the jobs that I have been doing so far, it's more like a hobby. So I don't worry about the paycheck, and I'm not saying that because I have money, but my reward is knowing that I'm able to help uplift someone else who was in a position just like I was. And I started what I do with the organization because when I migrated here, I came to the US at the age of 21 because I got raped. And I was looking for resources, and I realized that there were little or no books on men of color. And I kept saying to myself, I know I'm not the only person. There's way more than me. And I found a book. I forgot the name of the book. It's somewhere on the shelf here. And you know what? Give me 1 second. Actually, have it right here. Yep. It says No Secrets, No Lies: How Black Families Can Heal from Sexual Abuse by Robin D. Stone. And she was literally the foundation that guided me to get to where I'm at currently. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and he said, you know what? If you're trying to do this research and you're realizing that you're not finding anything that deals with men of color, why don't you do something? And after going through therapy, I was having a conversation with my therapist about the journal entries and how I cope with sexual abuse as a kid and as a young adult. And I decided to write the first book. The first book led to me doing my master's 11 years ago. And my master's thesis was on understanding male sexual abuse. I created a mock organization, moved from a mock organization to an actual real organization in New York City. And here I am today, coming from a pilot project, and I was given permission from the school to make some changes and tweak my thesis. And there was book two. And in the process of getting involved in foster care, I was commissioned by one of my CEOs to actually create a training manual on how to work with our foster kids who are victims of sexual trauma. And there came book number two, which I collaborated with Dr. Kim Ironton. And here I am today. So it's a pleasure to be here having this conversation because I met Ricardo years ago at a presentation, and he has been an inspirational person. He has given me a few contacts, and we have been in contact for a little bit over 10 years, I think, right?
Yeah, that sounds just about right. Time, wow, it's a long time ago.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
old.
I wouldn't put it that way. We just kind of like slow down the aging process a little bit.
41 looks good though, sorry.
I know, right? I'm turning 42 next year.
Oh, you're a year older. All right. I won't complain.
Absolutely. So let's kind of like jump in a little bit more, but like for people who don't understand or know what male sexual assault is, can you tell them a little bit of what male sexual assault is, or why is it framed as male sexual assault?
All right. So I think it's important for me to, one, just give this disclaimer.
Okay.
There are no correlation or connection between male sexual abuse, male rape, and homosexuality. And I'm saying that because too often, especially within the Black and brown community, when we address male sexual abuse, male sexual trauma, male rape, it automatically go in one direction. Oh, he gay. So, all right, we good. So we don't need to go there. And I'm going to say this, and I'm saying this not because I'm trying to be controversial, but the gay rights movement within itself sometimes does operate like a mafia. So oftentimes there are online issues that impacts and affect the gay community, and the way in which it's addressed, it ostracizes the community, and a lot of people, for the most part, don't want to. And there are a lot of folks who I know who have issues with me and their approach with the organization, but I've decided, probably about 7 years ago, to not have a direct alignment with any gay organization because it gives the idea notion that there's a direct correlation between one and the other, and there isn't. Mark you, I can just raise my hand in the room to say I identify as a Black gay man, but my sexuality and my sexual orientation has no bearings, no calling on the fact that I was abused as a child and raped as an adult male. So got that out. No, to be abused or raped, especially for a man, it is for, in terms of definition, it is from a heterosexual male. No, kind of strange and odd. I remember in the process of me doing understanding male sex abuse, there was a research I came upon where the researcher realized that other from male sex abuse, there's also homosexual sex abuse. And I was like, whoa, that's deep. And then I was like, how is it there's a difference between male sex abuse and homosexual sex abuse? So here it is. So male sex abuse is when a heterosexual man identifies as male and he uses force, coercion to sexually abuse a minor, teenager, and if it's two grown adults, it's defined as rape. No, for the homosexual male sex abuse, it is a homosexual male who identifies as a homosexual who molests or rape a male person. No, the homosexual sex abuse has more to do with the homosexual community. There are many young men who are at the point where they're trying to figure who they are. And with no technologies here, Ricardo, when me and you were 15, we had no gay apps to go on, right?
Of course not.
Did we even have cell phones back then to use?
Uh, what is it? Beepers?
Oh, you guys had beepers. I had none. I was living in Jamaica then, so I had nothing. Lucky enough, you had a beeper. So, and then when in our 20s, it wasn't apps either. It was a phone chat line.
Right.
And as we got closer to 30s, then I won't call no name because I'm not trying to do no public advertisement for none of these apps.
Right.
Then apps came about. So here what? The apps allowed more and more.
I think it took a while to, even if as we're talking about it, we have to talk about it also in saying, for white folks, the apps were more accessible than it was
Yes.
for a lot of black and
Yep.
brown people.
It existed long before we got access to it. It was always there, but they had greater access to it because of financial. I'm happy you brought that point because sometimes we don't take into consideration the economics into why is it male sexual trauma, especially within the black and brown community, occurs because sometimes not having enough of something. So back to the gay app situation. Too often, young black brown men just being curious, trying to find their bearings, trying to figure out who they are, will go online, meet someone, and yes, after 11 o'clock, after 12, who on the God's earth are you to decide that you're going to go to a total stranger's house after 12 o'clock to have a conversation? It's because I'm bored at home. I'm going through some level of trauma, trying to figure out who the heck I am. I'm not getting no support at home. And this person who I just met seemed really, really cool and nice. Did say that we're not going to have sex. Did say that, we're going to come over or they're going to come to my place and we're just going to just chill, watch TV or whatever. And as the night progresses, one thing leads to the other and someone was forced into having sex. And I know that I will get hit for this. Too often there are too many black and brown young men who uses weed, drugs, in the American context, because I'm Jamaican, so for me, weed is not drug. But in the American social cultural context, weed is drug.
Exactly.
So I will just give a disclaimer: never smoke it, have no issue with it, but for me, it's not drug. However, though, I can't walk away from the reality that it allows you to go to a different place.
Right.
And too often, I will see young men having this idea that if we're not doing 420, we're not doing this hookup, we're not going to meet up. So when we use the drug, when we use the weed, and it brings us somewhere else, we wake up the next day and said, we really, and forgive me for saying this, we really didn't fuck him, we really didn't suck his dick. It was the weed that I smoked that got me there. And then one person realized that, I really didn't want this to happen.
Right.
I felt as though someone forced me into doing this. No, most of my professional career, I have focused mainly on childhood sexual trauma. So, by definition, childhood sexual abuse is a grown adult. And by definition, we would use a grown adult. Even in the New York State context, the legal age of consent is 17. So, it would be a minor, even at 17, who has the legal right to have consensual sexual intercourse. We start from 17. If that person were to engage in any form of sexual activity, verbal, physical, print, and digital, towards a minor, by definition, is deemed as sexual abuse. Now, when it becomes penetrative, oral, and anal, then that is deemed as rape. So we have to put it on two sides, the physical part of it and then the visual and vocal part of it. No, Ricardo, I know you go to gym, I go to gym, and this is no pre-COVID. How many times have you gone to the gym and if you decide to go in the shower, but you're in the locker room and just the eyes alone feel as though you're being raped, makes you uncomfortable. Or you're in the shower and this has happened to me on more than one occasion. Someone literally walk in the shower. I don't know. And this is in a setting where other gay men frequent, so we feel somewhat safe.
Right.
And too often, gay men find themselves in those predicaments, even at the gym, where they're changing, taking off their clothes, and someone will even take a towel or a rag and slap the ass, or just use a hand and slap a cheek. The mere fact that it is unwanted, unsolicited, it can become a form of sexual abuse. And with this Me Too movement, more and more people are understanding what sexual abuse looks like and what sexual harassment looks like also. And even going to a club. I went clubbing, I think 2 weeks ago, I went to a bar in the city. And here am I just standing over the rule and taking the piss. And homeboy just came right next to me, jerking off. I'm like, yo, seriously, man? He was like, yo, and I'm I'm good. I'm just taking the piss. That's it. As simple as that is,
Right.
I'm mature. If this was someone younger, vulnerable, and there's an older person there, it could have gone somewhere else. And then that person would know, walk away and mark you, not because I'm curious and entertain the past, it doesn't justify what the older person did to me either.
Right.
And I'm saying that because when I got raped at 21, I got held down by a friend and his friend who was older because I caught them in a room let me not say jerking off. I caught them in the room masturbating and I got chastised for one simple reason because I walked in the room, saw them, and decided to watch, not participate. And I got dragged. And in the process of getting dragged, I got raped. And over the years, telling the story, I've had adults say to me, you never got raped. Because based on what you wrote and what I read, you were a willing participant. How can I be a willing participant? Just by observing, just by watching. And the mere fact that two people decided to hold me down and just say bluntly, just fuck me, or was that my fault? And the mere fact I was fighting, on the God's earth, could that become my fault? So one thing I've shared with survivors, when telling our story, tell the story not looking for validation,
Right.
empathy, or sympathy from anyone else. Tell the story because you want to tell your experience so that someone else can realize that they're not alone. And it's also healing and a cathartic process. I'm at a point where I no longer have casual conversations about my abuse or my rape because a lot of people have come to book readings and presentation. One, because I'm Jamaican. Two, because I'm Black. Three, because I'm male. And they so much want to sensationalize my story. And I encourage survivors to be very mindful in the context in which they share their story, because sometimes we can indeed share the story publicly and re-traumatize ourselves. So there's no need for that.
Right.
Tell the basics of what happened. For me, I was 5 years old. I was forced into a bathroom to perform oral sex on a teenage boy who was 17 years old. Between the ages of 14 to 16, I was sexually abused and raped by my neighbor. At the age of 21, I was held down by a friend and an older friend of his, and I got raped. That is my story. I don't need to go into anything else, because any other detail will rehash memories that I've already overcome, rehash, put one side, buried. So for me to be in a setting, even here, wanting to divulge the intricate details of my abuse, the trauma, and the rape, may probably walk away from the setting being more depressed than how I came on, which I'm not, but I don't want to do that. And I oftentimes encourage survivors not to put themselves in that kind of a predicament.
Yeah, and that's absolutely, someone say, "Wow, thanks for sharing your story." Yeah. So again, I'll just say this really quickly before we move on. If you have any questions, please put them in the comment. We will do our best to get them answered on air. So just type them in, and we'll try to get them all answered for you if you have any questions. So we know that, sexuality has come a very long way these days,
Mhm.
and people have, you know bisexuality, trisexuality, will try anything, whatever. um and the list goes on and on, and there are all sorts of variation of different stuff. And so I think sometimes people feel like, well, things are just happening, so if it happens, well, people sometimes, I'll say this. I had a friend when I uh, think I was like around 20 or 21, who went to a party, and someone put something in his drink, and he woke up in the subway station bleeding, covered in blood, and he was raped, and did not remember who raped him, and did not want to report it. So that's number one problem right there. Did not want to report it. So a lot of male rape goes unreported.
Yep.
That's number one. And number two, um, could not tell his family. So when he went home, he was too afraid to share this with his family, because they're super religious, and they would go from like him being assaulted to like saying, "Oh, well, it's because you're gay," kind of
Yes.
situation, which is what we just talked about
Yeah.
earlier. And then because of that, later found out that he was HIV positive because he was raped, and then he ended up committing suicide. So I mean, there's just the trauma just kept piling on and on and on. It was going from something bad happening to, I can't tell my family, I don't have my family support. Then I found out that I have this disease, and it's just crazy. So let's talk about the reporting, because I know a lot of people don't report when sexual trauma happens. So why do you think that men are less likely to report this particular trauma, specifically Black and brown men who may identify, or who identify as gay or bisexual?
I don't think we can address any social ills, any traumatic experiences that Black and brown men go through without opening Pandora's box and having a conversation about slavery. We can't. It's impossible,
Okay.
because it is the Judeo-Christian religion that was imposed upon Black folks that later on told our ancestors that homosexuality is a sin. And we have to bear in mind that a lot of Black men were used as breeders.
Oh, I think he's frozen there.
One of the reasons why marriage and monogamy within the Black and brown community isn't as high as our Caucasian or other ethnic groups is because throughout slavery, relationships, the union of a man and a woman in that marriage was never ever encouraged or entertained. Black men were seen mainly as breeders. They impregnate a group of women. I'm not sure if you probably. I'm not trying to be crass or anything, but there's this word motherfucker, and so
Oh,
many
I'm
kids grow
very,
up
I'm
using it.
very aware of where that comes from.
Do not even understand the historical and social context of that
Yep.
word. It comes directly from slavery
Yeah.
because this black man was no pushed into a room to have sex with as many women, and there have been occasions where he literally had sex with his mom, and he now became an outcast because he's a motherfucker. And that's why I tell my kids, don't play that word, man, because you don't know the historical context, the social trauma that black men traditionally had to have gone through. No, let's touch on the religion and the gay thing before you even reach to not wanting to disclose sexual abuse. Black men traditionally, from slavery, has blared the bulk and the brunt of holding on to the family unit and wanting to be that defender. And can you imagine being a black slave 200 years ago, knowing that your wife and your kids can be snatched away from you at any point in time? Masses there beating your black ass with a cat o' nine before everybody because he's putting you as an example. Did you also know that from a historical context that a lot of black men were raped by white men to keep them subdued and submissive,
Mm-hmm.
so that they did not want to rebel? And these white men, these plantation owners, these slave drivers would ensure that everyone in the community know that these bulky, rough-looking, by social definition, black men were raped, were fucked. Let me just use that graphic term. They were fucked. So when a man back in slavery days is fucked, you ripped him of his masculinity. You take every shit away from him. He's no longer a man because he could even defend himself. He can't defend his woman. He can't defend his mother. He can't protect his kids, and he can't even protect himself. Then when you just juxtapose religion and homosexuality, because religion teaches us, the Judeo-Christian religion teaches us that the only sin in the Bible is the homosexual sin. There's no
Basically,
other sin.
or at least that it's the greater, like that
The
it's
greatest sin of
is
all the sins
all
that is
sin.
in the Bible.
Right.
We know there are more, but that is the only one that we go to church on a Sunday or on a Sabbath and get preached, talked about, make you feel less than who you are. So within the black social context, when you add the historical context to it, you add religion into it, ain't nobody gonna talk. Who you gonna talk to? Because guess what? You're gonna be the next sister, you're gonna be the next faggot. So who we gonna talk to? And then here the other issue. There's no support at home. And if there's no support at home, just like how your friend decided to commit suicide because we're going to go back to historical context, we didn't have as many STDs back then or even HIV back then, but it's easier to kill yourself. And we wonder why is it alcoholism, the rates of black and brown men drinking alcohol is so high. Have you ever, when you were living in New York, have you ever realized or even understand just visually that there's a liquor shop on every other block in a black neighborhood in New York City?
Oh, of course.
Through this pandemic,
It's the same thing that happens
uh,
here in Florida.
okay, a
In the black
supermarket was
community.
seen as an essential place.
Oh, service went out again.
Hey, but here what we do though, because there's no outlet, there's nowhere for us to go and have conversation about what has occurred. It's easier to use a liquor. Moonshine. who've been drinking, black men, brown men who've been victims of sexual trauma, has been drinking moonshine for a long time. And when every other liquor brand came in, use it. I remember having a bottle of Appleton rum in my freezer, chilled. And I started drinking liquor from the age of 10. I became a functional alcoholic by the time I was 21 years old. And by the time I was 24, my liver got completely destroyed. And the only way I knew how to cope with my sexual trauma was to drink. And one of my ripple, other from drinking, was to just fuck it off. And I'd made a pledge in that from when I was early that any man who found me attractive or just want to make a pass at me, I'm going to just fuck them just because I'm going to just do revenge fuck. That's it. And I remember getting an STD probably every single month in the city and going to every single health department, giving them a different name because I was so embarrassed, so ashamed. It wasn't until my liver got destroyed I realized that I had to face the reality of what I was going through.
Right.
And it was a hard, painful reality though, because I told myself, I'm not good. My daddy been drinking liquor from me when he was a kid. He's in his, I think daddy was in his 50s then. He ain't dead. But no. But here what I've realized, everything happens in life exactly at the right time. My niece was born when I was 24, and it was for her why I continued to live because I wanted a purpose. And my purpose was her. I wanted to see my sister's first child. And that is why I decided to give it up and started treatment. But another reason, even though contemporary, why is it a lot of black men struggle is we don't have enough therapists who look like us. We don't have enough clinicians who are trained, who look like us. And that is one of the reasons why I'm committed and dedicated in the work I do, because other young black men need to see my face. They need to see that face to say, it happened to him when he was my age. This is the steps he took to get to where he's at right now. No, there are a lot of women who are in heterosexual relationships and they're getting abused.
Mm-hmm.
And if they were to take the time to get some level of professional help for their husbands, I guarantee you one thing, most of these men were victims of sexual trauma at some point in time. There are, and I'm going to use the Caribbean context, those within the African diaspora and those who live here in North America. A lot of black and brown men have 5, 7, and 10 kids. One reason, it is his way of proving to all of us in society that he's a man because he has several baby mamas on the outside. And if you get to the root of why is it he's doing that, somewhere along the line, someone touched him. I remember in foster care, we had a 16-year-old who had 3 girls pregnant in his building. And everybody was bad-mouthing this teenage boy. And I'm like, oh, he this. And I'm like, hold up. What's the history? What's the background? Who's in the house? And I'm like, so nobody ever sat this young man down and have a conversation about history?
No, it's easier to make assumptions.
Why is it he's so promiscuous? Oh, because he's a tug, he's the N word, and he's just no. I say, can we have a talk? Had a conversation with this young man. His uncle raped him when he was 14.
Wow.
Not only did the uncle rape him at 14, the cousin also raped him when he was 14. And because he's in the project, in the wood, the only way for him to feel as though that he was not emasculated by his uncle and cousin is for him, and forgive me because it's exactly what he said, I gotta fuck all the bitches in the neighborhood to let them know I'm a real nigga. That's reality. This is not some make-believe. That's just...
So basically, he just internalized that.
Oh, hell yeah.
Project that out as a way of saying, how this is how I have to demonstrate to the world around me that I am more than what happened to me.
Yeah, but bear in mind also, uncle and cousin aren't gay. It's a power dynamics. And he himself isn't gay either. But the act occurred. But religion teaches us that once the act occurs, you're automatically tagged as a homosexual. And that's one reason why I don't do church. Any organized group that is going to use language and words to let a victim become more victimized, I don't want to have anything to do with it, man. I'm sorry. I won't do it. No, can't.
So then how is OBDI, or how is your organization now working to create, to kind of like level the playing field, or to kind of like bring about this awareness or having some sort of social impact?
All right. COVID just COVID has been good and COVID has been bad, but just let's say that throughout the pandemic, it has been a real struggle because dealing with male sex abuse, oftentimes most male victims would rather that one-on-one interaction or that face-to-face interaction. And a lot of the men who I work with, poor, don't have access to social media, don't have access to a lot of technological resources. So even though initially we were starting to do some virtual sessions, the people who we were trying to grab a hold of, it became somewhat of a challenge. Financially, it was also a struggle, but we were able to do some fundraising, get some money. And this year has been a real struggle for myself personally and the organization because I got diagnosed with cancer earlier this year. And I just had to just refocus and regroup. Whoopee, I'm good, cancer free, don't have no cancer, I'm all good. So coming 2022, I'm refocusing, rebranding the organization. And hopefully, I think there are enough grants and financial resources that the federal government have pumped in because more and more victims, more and more people have been victimized through this pandemic that we've been going through. And they're going to need help and they're going to need support. So our aim is to latch on to as much federal funding, federal financial resources that is out there. We have our 501(c)(3), so we are legit nonprofit. We can gathering money. So we're actually going back on the drawing board, stepping outside of the traditional comfort box and reinvent ourselves in this new age of this pandemic.
Okay. Yeah, with COVID, the way how people access services now are changing
Yep.
drastically, and it's not going to go back to how it was.
Mhm.
We're forever change,
Nope.
and more. I think we had like the baby boomer generation that is used to going into a brick and mortar location, right? But then,
Mhm.
we have the millennials and the Gen Z and the Gen X, and if it's not an iPad in front of them,
Nope.
they're not, if they can't just, the baby boomers didn't mind waiting. They're
Yep.
used to like 10 people getting the same appointments, and they sit there for 2-3 hours for service. The millennials and the Gen Zs, they're just kind of like, listen, I'm here at 10, it's not available. Okay, I'm leaving. Now,
Yep. I'm
so
gone. I'm
you have
gone.
people have to start beginning to think about how they're going to innovate their services in order to be able to meet the demand or even keep their clientele, because folks are going to migrate other places where their needs are being met. But
Yep.
I think also with this pandemic, it allow us, because some states have more African American, Black and brown counselors
Mhm.
than others. And I think what has happened now is that people are able to now dial into people who
Yes.
understand them culturally and understand, kind of like how they are in the context of, you understand that community because you've had lived experiences that mirrored my experiences. So that counseling session can really work best to address the issues that I'm facing versus talking to someone who has you cut you and you're it's like when you talk to someone who don't understand, and I can use us for a second, like you and I can get into a conversation about Jamaica, about
Mhm.
going on about, race in America and all of that. And we're come from we're coming from a mutual place where we can jump into a conversation and understand right off the bat. But if we bring someone else from the outside into that conversation, now we have to kind of like go back and
Yep.
kind of like bring them up to speed in order to get there. And frankly, sometimes I don't want to go through 400 years of slavery
Yeah.
to explain to you why this is a problem for me.
But here what I've said regarding, so what everything you just said a while ago has everything to do with what we call social competence. No, not social, cultural competence.
Right.
No, most time when people hear me have these conversations about cultural competence, when it comes on to therapy and getting support for Black and brown men, so many people are quick to use that race card. And I push it aside. I don't make it an issue because people who look like us can't be racist, because unless you've lived our experience, you don't understand what we're going through. So,
Right.
but however, though, for 10 years, I had a white woman who was my therapist. She was the best because she understood what cultural competence looked like. She took the time in understanding my culture, where I'm coming from. So I'm not gonna just make this blanket statement that if you are someone of color, you're trying to get help and support, you have to go to someone who look like you, ideally. Because don't get me wrong though, I've recommended survivors to go to people who look like us. And they come back and say, "What did you?" I'm like, "What happened?" And they will say, they spoke to me as though their head was in their ass. I'm like, "Oh no." But they, and they say, yeah, they are African American, but there's heifer or there's act as though he was better than me. And I'm like, "Oh no, I'm sorry. I sincerely apologize." But and I can always also I've had clinicians and therapists here in New York who look like me and you, and they don't act like me and you. They
Right.
act as though they have no clue what the Black struggle looks like because they probably went to an Ivy League school or they went to a well-to-do school. And for the internship, they were the only Black person that was there. So they came out in through the back door, because that's where they walked into the back door, but they came out whitewash. So when they're trying to address our issues, the thing that really impacts our community, they're always looking through a white lens.
Of course.
So we have to be also mindful of those who even look like us, who will even further victimize those who look like them to say, "You are the problem, though. You live in the project, and this is." And I'm like,
Because the content of what they're learning is often studied around people who don't look like
"Yes,
you. So
yes, that's it."
when you try to mirror that with us, it's not going to be
Can't,
reflective of who
can't.
we are. And so yeah, and yes, sometimes our own people, or people
Hmm.
who look like you and I, don't really, have that cultural sensitivity or
Yep,
cultural context to connect those things, because it's everybody's reality in America is different, and not everybody's going to have the same reality, and we're very
yep,
fine with that. But I think that if we are truly want to work with certain groups of people and truly want to help those groups of people to succeed, to be better, to grow, to get over, to learn, to build, we have to make sure that we understand those cultural contexts and
yep,
understand how we can practice cultural sensitivity and cultural humility.
yep.
All right. So time is coming. And so before we go, there's two more things that we just need to touch on. So I wanted to for you to share, and then maybe you can type it in that message down there so folks can be able to access your site. So tell people where they can find more information if they have experience, or they have experiences that they feel we just lost him. He'll be back on soon. But I wanted to make sure that we kind of like provide the resources out there. Um,
All right.
I wanted to
So
I wanted to make
the
sure that
website.
people know where to find you and how they can contact you if they have questions, if they need additional resources.
Okay.
So when we do this show, it's about really just allowing you to be able to share this resource with the community so the community have access to it.
So, two things. One, you can go direct to our website, is obdi.org, and you will see all that we do there. We also have a quarterly newsletter, and the whole purpose of the quarterly newsletter is to highlight survivors of male sex abuse / rape, sexual trauma, and have them tell their story in their own authentic voice. And in the newsletter, there are varied resources, and I try my best to give as much current information. The last two magazines newsletter we had, we focused heavily on the pandemic and how much victims of sexual trauma are being more victimized and the lack of help and resources that they were faced with through the pandemic. And for 2022, we're going to focus more on resources part of it. No, we're not over the pandemic, but so much has changed. More states, more cities have opened up their doors. People are now stepping outside of their comfort zone, reinventing stuff. So that is how we actually highlight resources and how we're doing what we're doing.
Okay. All right. And if some and what would you say to someone who's sitting down right now who might have experienced sexual assault but have not told anyone, or it's eating them up inside and they're looking for an outlet, or they might be doing something choosing a negative hobby to get over it? What would you say to that person right now?
The first thing is to admit to yourself that this is not your fault. You never asked for this to happen. And this one word, forgiveness. Forgiveness is not about someone else. It is not about the person who did you wrong. Forgiveness is about you forgiving yourself for believing that at any point in time, whatever you endured, whatever occurred in your past to have caused you that level of pain was never your fault. And the moment you've gotten to that point where you fully forgive yourself, you have owned that story that this person, my uncle, my father, my brother, the church elder, someone who my family trusted, forced me, hurt me, harmed me, molest, got me to here, and it wasn't my fault. That's the first step in this journey. The second step after that forgiveness, third. So you own it, come to terms, accept it that this is what happened to me, accept the story for you. You don't care about nobody else. 2, forgiveness. 3, coming to a point where you understand what your triggers are and what are your coping mechanisms. Sex is an easy tool as a coping mechanism. Liquor is an easy tool. Drugs, illicit drugs, is another easy tool. No, you search the negative and then you try and create some positives from all of that. I'm a firm believer that I'm thankful and grateful for the experiences, because if it wasn't for the experiences, I couldn't have been here to have written 3 books, have an organization, and help the group of people that I'm continuing to help in my life. So my past is my past. And while there are some days where there are some mild triggers, but I'm not at a point where I'm self-destructing. I've moved beyond that. No, once you get to the negative triggers, the negative thing that you're doing to cope with whatever is going on, get a book. And I've always encouraged people to get a book, get a journal, get a piece of paper, wherever you want to put it. But this is not where you put ideas. It comes from here and you put it here. And, start writing down the things that makes you happy, that makes you whole, that makes you alive. For me, cooking is one of my big things. And I like cooking for people. For me, it's all about the presentation. And the kick from that is knowing that someone is enjoying my meal. I live in New York, so I only get to garden in spring and summer. I live for the warm months. I live when spring comes. I go to the garden store. I go to Home Depot. I go to Costco, and I get my big bags of buds, bulbs, plant them, and I nurture them. And when the flowers come, as they will, I cut them, put them in vases, and not only do I put them around my home, I give them to friends and loved ones. It's getting to a point where you learn to convince yourself that I know that someone I admired, trust, liked, harmed, and hurt me and got me here. However, I survived though. And because I've survived, I'm going to be thankful and grateful that I'm still living. My being, my presence is still here. And you try to make yourself whole. Not everyone needs to go to traditional therapy. I no longer go to therapy because my garden, the work I do, the cooking that I do, the love and the gifts I give to people, that is my therapy. My therapy is knowing that I'm able to, and I still work in social services with kids, is knowing that I'm able to work with young black boys, young brown boys who look like me, and I can give them hope of still being a kid and not rob them of their happiness as someone robbed me of my childhood when I was growing up. And even as adult males, allow them to realize that the mere fact that you got up this morning and you were able to lift your legs and move your arms, and this is the most important part of our being, you exhale and you inhale, then it means that the universe that we are all a part of woke you up. And the mere fact you woke up today, it means that you're able to do everything that you so want to do that you could not have done yesterday. And for me, that is the most magnificent thing that anybody could have, the breath of life. And just knowing that I got up today and I'm alive. And the simple thing of just saying, I'm thankful for this day. Yes, this person harmed me, this person hurt me. And hey, he fucked my life up. We never touched on women also being perpetrators of sexual abuse. But I got up today, and while I got up today, I have hope that I can live a better life tomorrow. I can be a better person, even though all of this happened to me.
Wow, that was so insightful and so full. And Lisa, you're gonna have to come back on the show
Okay.
again, and we're gonna have to talk about it. And yes, I know we didn't talk about women as being sexual perpetrators. So I mean, we'll have to discuss that on the next go.
Hmm.
So you do have a book coming out again, a book coming out
Oh, oh
in
yeah, oh
February.
yeah. So, uh, my new book is called My Kind of Love. It's book two to God. What is book one again? I forgot the name of book one. Oh God, My Kind of Love is book one. Is book two. It's coming out next month. If you really want to understand what it's like to be a Jamaican gay man who struggles with being a homosexual, finding love in all the wrong places, and finding love eventually, check out My Kind of Love. It is going to get released next month. My Instagram account is My Kind of Love. My Facebook is a Brian Dennis. I really post on Facebook. I'm kind of over Facebook right now. But I'm on Instagram. I'm on TikTok. And what's the other one name? Snapchat. And they're all My Kind of Love. So thank you for even having me plug that in, because I'm beyond excited over that love story, because I firmly believe that, especially as Black gay men, as Afrocentric gay men, as Caribbean gay men, as gay men who are part of the African diaspora, too often when we hear stories of our gayness, is always with some negative connote. So I felt that it was important for me to leave a legacy of a love story of what it's like to have money, be educated, be in a healthy homosexual relationship outside of the traditional Judeo-Christian heterosexual normative lifestyle. And can I say this? Always say to people, while I want to be a gay man and force myself to the ideals of a Judeo Christian lifestyle, knowing for a fact Christian heterosexual couples are getting married and not even lasting. The marriages are not lasting. So what I want to emulate something that isn't even working. Why can I not create my kind of love? So my kind of love, it's fictional. It's dedicated to my ex, and I'm beyond thankful for the experiences from that relationship to get me to where I'm at, where I'm fully embracing and understanding my kind of love. And in order for me to have gotten to the point where I could have write my kind of love, guess what? I had to first understand what love is.
Mm,
And as RuPaul always said, how can you try to love somebody else without even learning how to love yourself first?
facts.
So I got that.
Absolutely. You know, I was sitting here and I was like, I remember like the first time you and I met, it was a whole debate. We had a whole debate. I
Yep.
know it was like a workshop or something, but
Hmm.
we had a whole, I think we must have talked for like 2 hours.
Yes,
We
we
were
did. Yes, we did.
it just kind of, and every time we get on the phone, it'll turn into a whole, back and forth. But good, because I think in that conversation, we keep challenging each other,
Yes.
about what people perceive as as the
Hmm.
norm, what people perceive as acceptable and not, and how do we kind of like define this whole LGBT around how we are culturally and how we identify or see ourselves spiritually, or even if we're attached to a religious institution.
Hmm.
And so hats off to you, man. I have like the greatest respect for you. I've watched your growth, and we've had um a book reading
Yes,
at
we did.
my apartment in New York City, and that was really good. I think we had a couple of young men there, and it was a very deep and intimate conversation. And I think to this day, I think a lot of people still remember it. So
I do. I won't say what I remember, but I do. There was a very heated conversation.
oh yes,
It's just one of those things where people walked away being very angry with me for, and as always, just being very blunt. And I can say this. I remember we were writing down stuff in our hats,
right,
and my question
right.
was, how many sexual partners have you had? And to my surprise, there were people there who were in my age group, people who I knew I had sex with was like, oh, five, oh, two, and I'm like, bitch, seriously? What?
I'll tell
And I
you.
remember one of your girlfriends was way, way in the front, and she said, no, 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 no. That dude has not said anything all night. And typically, I've always been very, very shy, even though I'm really not a shy person. But if I'm in a group and I have nothing to say, or I'm unaware of the subject topic, or have nothing to input, I'm going to shut up. I ain't going to say nothing. But you know me. When it comes down to this one,
I believe was
uh,
it Chastity was her name. Yes,
I'm going to
Chastity
go
called
out.
you out.
And I remember she pointed at me, and then you were saying, Dennis, don't say nothing. And she said, no, no, let him talk. And I said, if I were to count, I'm going to start from 100. People are like, I felt like people were pulling their pearls off. And I'm like, And I'm going to start at number 200. And someone said, 200 what? And I'm like, it means I fucked over 200. And they went, hold up. And I remember this one dude, he was like going off, and I'm like, I said, furthermore, you need to shut up because I've seen you in places where I know that you've passed through 15 already, so don't do it. And people started coming at me, and I'm like,
It
how
was,
can we be in a safe space
mhm.
and we're trying to allow the younglings to understand the shit that we've gone through, and we can't even own our own shit? So guess what? Let me own mine. I'm
Right.
going to start from 100, 200. I wasn't at 300 yet. I know past 300 already. But guess what? I'm saying with pride and confidence that guess what? I had a past like anybody else, and I fucked my 20s. Oh my God, I did. I'm 40. Yeah, I fucked the 20s and the 30s. I ain't fucking the 40s no more because that's a whole different kind of sex. Different conversation. Sex
Right.
in your 40s is way different than in your 20s and 30s. So I don't need to be promiscuous at 40 because of all the experience I've had. I can honestly say I do know how to fuck. So I don't need to run down everybody because I can have a different kind of sex in my 40s. But it's okay to have an open, honest, real, honest conversation to say, hey, I did it. It's like some people say, "Oh, I've never taken crystal meth, I've never taken coke before." But how many times we've been in the clubs in New York City and it's not all that is being offered? Say, you know what? I'm not a active user, but I probably may have touched at one point in time. I've never touched coke before. I struggle with a use sinus problem, but while I've never touched coke before, I've had quite a few men who have snorted coke on my dick. So should I say that I took coke too? No, I didn't. But I've been around settings where this was my reality. My job, I think, as I'm getting older, is to be as open and transparent. So the mistake that my elders made by not sharing and telling their story of their fuck ups and how they deal with their fuck ups, I won't do that to the young ones coming up because I'm gonna be religious. No, I'm gonna quote Matthew 5 verses 16. I'm always gonna let my light shine so bright that they may see who I am and understand that this body, this being, this temple, this vessel that was loaned to me by my creator, it is marred, it is marked, it is bruised, it is rudely constructed, but this is who I am though. And the only thing that will ever set me free is the truth. And I've always said to survivors, never let someone tell you a story about yourself. I am the master of my narrative, and I ask permission to tell the story no more. I just choose not to tell it. And if I do tell it, if I'm not getting a check at the end of the day, we're good, because I'm not going to re-traumatize myself for free.
Exactly. And so we're gonna wrap it up here, and we're gonna continue our conversation. But I've been getting messages already saying, "Hey, we need you to come back." Like people are already are like messaging me right now. So,
Okay.
so we're gonna have to bring you back. When is your book coming out? Is February or March?
I think so. My birthday is March 1st, so I pushed them for it to come out sometime in February. So at least I can have a live copy. And I'm actually doing something which is so not traditional. I'm actually doing a book trailer. Well, it was a book trailer. Now I'm a mini movie, and I'm actually going to Jamaica to launch the book.
Okay.
All the places on earth, I've decided to go to Jamaica, but for safety reasons and for those who are there, I've decided to not disclose the location until afterwards. But I'm heading down to Jamaica to launch this book and to tell our side of the story of what it's like to be Jamaican and gay.
Well, we would love to definitely have whatever links if you're gonna or
Oh,
videos
hell yes. Oh, hell yes.
we can help you to promote
Yes,
that
sir.
and also kind of like share this experience. And then we should, hopefully we can connect with you again before the summer. So this way we can continue having this conversation because I know people are going to be watching this and somebody's going to say, this has happened. Let me reach out. Let me talk to someone. So, Mr. O'Brien Dennis, I want to
Thank you so much, sir.
for being on the show. I really appreciate
it. It's a pleasure.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, if you feel like you can benefit from some of the resources that Dennis has spoken about today, would love for you to go on to the obdi.org website and check out the resources that are available. Thank you again for being on the Campbell Talk Show. We look forward to seeing you next time.